Hello everybody, welcome back to another lecture. So today we are taking a look at Jason Kawall's piece, The Experience Machine and Mental State Theories of Well-Being. One thing I want to say about this piece up front is that it's a good example of objecting to an argument, trying to show that a particular conclusion doesn't follow from a particular set of premises or reasons. That's really the whole upshot of this piece. So Kawall himself is not trying to make, not trying to provide some kind of full theory or some kind of full answer to the issues that we're looking at. Rather, he is pointing out that the experience machine from Nozick that we were looking at last day does not necessarily show what many people have thought that it shows. So Kawall himself is a professor at Colgate University in New York, professor of philosophy and environmental studies, and he holds an endowed chair, so he sort of gets extra money and prestige and things like this in culture and environment, and he works on issues in ethics and the environment broadly, as well as issues in epistemology, so the theory of knowledge. So what are we going to see in this piece? Well, and then I screwed myself up and covered up the thing. So I've broken it down into three parts. Maybe I can sneak myself in here. So he explains briefly what mental state theories of well-being are. And so I'm just going to abbreviate that to MST, so mental state theory, and it's a mental state theory of well-being. And there are different versions of them. So for instance, Bentham's utilitarianism that we're looking at is one kind of MST. It's one particular version. There are others that have been proposed. So we're going to see Kawall explain that briefly, and then what the objection is from the experience machine. So in some ways, this first part is almost like a little bit of a summary from what we were looking at last day. Second, Kawall is going to argue that the experience machine thought experiment doesn't exclusively target mental state theories of well-being, that it's not a direct objection to them, that in fact it can be pointing out other sorts of things. So then finally, Kawall is going to propose that mental state theories of well-being can be maintained. Somebody can be a mental state theorist and admit that it's more than just our mental states that matter. That's going to be, in some sense, I think, the trickiest part of this. That's what we're going to get around to at the end. And then I'm going to offer a few thoughts on what Kawall's piece and his discussion of mental state theories and the experience machine might show us or tell us about what we're looking at in the films, how we might apply this, avenues for further thought. So one other thing I want to reiterate here, and as we're going through, particularly in this unit, this is in some ways, it can be a hard topic to really engage with in its own right when you're dealing with it through the medium of the film or something. When you look at a particular situation like Cypher in the Matrix, or Cobb in Inception, or Mal in Inception, or we sort of look at Ready Player One and what's going on there, we often get these intuitions about whether or not people are doing the right thing or it's the wrong thing, and sort of what's going on there, given the particular scenario. And when we try to go to that higher level of abstraction or generality, this can be a bit of a difficult issue to engage with. And so the readings that I've put together on this are really trying to prime you to think about it in certain sorts of ways, get you thinking about it. But I'm not just trying to give you some kind of answer. Now, Bentham is pretty clear in his answer, and Nozick are pretty clear in their answer as well. But when I'm looking for your engagement and your thinking, and looking at the forum posts and thinking about the essays and so on, I'm not just looking for you to tell me a whole bunch of things I already know, right? Oh, well, this was said in this piece, and this was said in this piece, and this was said in this piece, right? Okay, tell me that for a purpose, right? I don't just need summaries of the pieces. And in fact, with the limits I've put on the amount of space you have for what I want you to do, say in the forums as well as in the essays, you've really got to sort of narrow in and think about it and say, okay, this is the part, or these are the parts of these pieces that matter for what I want to say. I want to be in conversation with these somehow. I want these to do something for me, right? Think about it that way. Explain the material for a purpose, not just as an exercise in explaining things for its own sake, but rather in explaining it so that your reader who doesn't know all the things that you do. Right? As you're learning content through this course, you are changing your own mental states. You know things you didn't know before watching the films, if you hadn't seen them, or reading the pieces, or hopefully watching the lecture videos and so on. So, right, it's not just about, oh, learn this stuff and then just sort of give it back to me. Learn the stuff and then think about it and do something with it, right? Do something new. Get your own position out of it. Produce your own argument. That's where I want to see you go. I don't want to just make you sort of little robots repeating things I tell you. I want to see you take in information, think about it, synthesize it, produce something new and interesting, of high caliber, excellent quality, well put together, well thought out, clearly explained. It's a nice, strong argument. That's the goal. Okay, so this first section, mental state theories of well-being and the experience machine. So what is a mental state theory of well-being? Well, luckily Kawall is pretty nice and clear, and one other benefit of this piece is that it's pretty short and to the point, which is always lovely. He tells us the central feature shared by such accounts, mental state theories of well-being, is that a person's well-being is improved or diminished only by events which enter into her mental or psychological life. Right? And the only is important here. Really, a mental state theory of well-being is telling us, right, all that matters when we think about our well-being are our mental states. Now, another way to put that, which somebody could object to this move I'm going to make, but I'm still going to make it anyway, and for the purpose of the course, I suggest accepting it, though if you've got good reason to object and you think there's a purpose to objecting to it, you think you can get something out of it or show that there's an interesting conclusion, by all means, object to what I say, object to the moves I make. That's part of what we're doing here. On mental state theories of well-being, really all that matters for our well-being are our mental states. So we can rephrase that all that is valuable for us are our mental states, right? So here I'm running together or equating our well-being and what's valuable to us. Now, maybe that's not quite right, but I'm going to do that for our purposes here because, you know, really this unit, this topic, right, value and reality, does something have to be real to be valuable? Do our experiences have to reflect reality the way it really is to be valuable? Or in fact, can our experiences have value more or perhaps less value than veridical experiences when they accurately reflect reality? So this is really the view, right? This is what mental state theories are. Bentham's utilitarianism is a version of this, and it says specifically that all that really matters for our well-being or all that's really valuable are our mental states, specifically how they relate to pain and pleasure. Right? So pleasurable mental states are good, painful mental states are bad. Right? All mental states get valued in that way. So there's no way of trying to measure or evaluate our mental states independent of using that criteria of pain and pleasure. Right? But it's just the mental states that matter. So you can have other mental state theories of well-being that agree that it's only mental states that matter, but they could object to the hedonism that Bentham endorses, namely that it's only pain and pleasure that matters. So you could have a mental state theory that says instead, look, it's not necessarily pain or pleasure that makes the mental state valuable or not valuable, right, that improves or diminishes our well-being, but rather there are other factors or other parts of our mental states that matter. Say our ability to choose, right, make choices about what sorts of mental states we're going to have rather than have them be pre-programmed, having other sorts of characteristics or qualities in the mental states, right? Say that they're clear rather than sort of fuzzy or confused, that they involve perhaps creativity, right, rather than just sort of rote repetition or something. So you can introduce other metrics into how we want to measure or evaluate the mental states in different mental state theories of well-being. Bentham provides us one kind of theory like that says all that matters is mental states. That's what all the MSTs have in common, but then they can differ in the ways that they think those mental states matter or are valuable. Okay, hope that's clear. So, on to the experience machine. Now, Kawall, of course, So reproduces the little blurb out of Nozick that I asked you to read, or at least part of it. He also points to a few other thinkers, such as Wilkin Blicka, and there's one or two other people that get mentioned, who basically seem to agree with Nozick. And he's got a few little quotes just trying to show what they're trying to say. Now, we'll just stay focused on the experience machine, given that that's the piece I was asking you to read that's really posing the objection. So we can see Bentham really offering a view, right, offering a kind of theory or a kind of position on what sorts of things really matter. Nozick objecting to that view, saying, no, Bentham can't be right. Why? Because we wouldn't plug into the experience machine, which we would if he was right. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us there's other things that matter than our mental states. Kawall is coming along, offering another layer of objections. He's objecting to Nozick's objections to something like Bentham's view, right? Saying, well, look, even if Bentham isn't right entirely, the experience machine isn't the thing that's going to show us that he's wrong. Right? Okay, so the objection to mental state theories that's supposed to be based on the experience machine holds that if mental state theories were correct, right, really all that was valuable or all that mattered to our well-being were our mental states, then we should all obviously plug into the experience machine. We don't want to plug into the experience machine. Right? It denies the consequent, denies the then part. So logically, we get to deny the antecedent, the if part, right? If mental state theories were correct, we'd all want to plug into the experience machine, but we don't want to all plug into the experience machine, so mental state theories must be false. This is really the argument as Kawall presents it. He says this seems to capture really what's going on in those various sorts of objections, and the experience machine is the thing that really seems to encapsulate that, and a lot of thinkers have held that up and said, look, the experience machine shows us that mental state theories must be wrong. So that's the objection, that the experience machine is supposed to show us the mental state theories. However, Kawall wants to formulate things a little bit differently. Right? So this is one way to formulate it. Kawall gives us this other formulation, right? First, we would not abandon our commitments and values, even if such behavior were to lead to better mental states for us. This is reflected clearly in our reactions to the experience machine. And he says, okay, this seems right. Hence, it's clear that we value more than our mental states. Therefore, there's more to our well-being than mere mental states. So this is a second way of trying to formulate that argument, trying to formulate that point. We wouldn't want to plug into the experience machine, which shows us that there's more to our well-being. We value things other than just our mental states. Now, in thinking about the experience machine, and I've gone and made that a little bit too big on the top there. Now, so that's the general idea, right? The experience machine is supposed to show us that mental state theories are wrong. However, Kawall wants to fight against precisely that point, right? He wants to object that, in fact, the experience machine doesn't just target mental state theories of well-being, right? The experience machine isn't just a clear objection to mental state theories. In fact, mental state theories can adapt themselves to incorporate what the experience machine seems to be showing us. Right? So, for example, we would not want to abandon our real-world commitments simply to improve mental states, right? Our mental states and others. Kawall gives this example. He says, imagine that you're offered a chance to lead an extremely happy and productive life, which would also produce more happiness for others. However, to lead the alternative life, you must leave your home, family, and friends and never see them again. Most people would refuse such an offer, just as they would refuse the offer of being placed on the experience machine. What does Kawall think this shows us? Well, what this shows us is that the experience machine potentially targets a number of different values, including our commitments to friends, family, perhaps our commitment to reality, right? We think reality really matters. The experience machine doesn't just target mental state theories of well-being broadly, but rather helps highlight that we care about lots of different things. We don't just care about or value our mental states. We care about or value other things. So Kawall says this, he says, we would reject alternative lives in which we would be guaranteed more pleasure, or in which we would maximize overall utility, or in which we would have great accomplishments, if the alternatives required us to abandon our current lives and commitments, whether or not an experience machine is involved. This shows that the experience machine itself plays little role in our attitudes when we consider the case. We are not rejecting a life on the experience machine in particular. We would reject almost any other life, in the actual world or otherwise, if it involves abandoning our commitments. So the experience machine isn't just showing us that a view like Bentham's is wrong. Rather, part of what the experience machine is helping to show us is that we care about our commitments. Right? We care about our commitments to other people, to reality, right? We care about the networks of relationships we find ourselves in. Now, just stopping on that point for a moment, one idea that Kawall doesn't explore, right? He just doesn't raise it here, so it's something worth thinking about. Consider this scenario. What if our family and friends also hooked up to the experience machine so that we can enjoy a virtual life together? Right? Now, of course, there's a question, what guarantee would we have that the simulated version of our loved ones we experience are accurate or veridical, right? Once we plug in, how do we know that we're really engaged with, the real person, right? If I plug in with my family and friends, and once I'm in there, how can I be sure that in fact the projections or avatars or whatever it is I'm seeing are really them, or that they're really having the experiences I think they're having? And of course, we can add on to this, thinking about Bostrom and so on, and ask, what assurance do we have right now that the people we think are real and that we're interacting with are in fact real, and they aren't just projections or simulations or what have you? Which is coming back to this basic point that Kawall doesn't really think about. We actually find this in the films, right? Think about in Yusef's, the chemists in Inception, a whole group of about a dozen people come to dream together every day, right? They want to come share the dream. They want to live in that world together, presumably because they judge that it's better than the world they find themselves in. Think about Ready Player One. Wade and all sorts of other people, it sounds like really a majority of people, spend their time in the Oasis. Why? Because they judge that it's better than living in reality. Even though at the end of the film, once their reality has become of a higher quality, at least Wade decides, oh, well, people just need to spend more time in reality, right? Thanks, voice of privilege, right? Now that things are good for you, you've decided for everybody else, that's how they need to be. And of course, in the Matrix as well, given that from what we understand, all the people walking around the Matrix are real people and they've been plugged in there for, the whole time, to leave the Matrix is actually to leave your family and friends, right? It's to leave the people you have relationships with. Now, Neo, of course, is this sort of loner character that doesn't really have those relations. And so leaving the Matrix, he doesn't have to face those sorts of questions. But what if the situation were different? What if he was, happily married and had a couple of kids and, right, had all these people that cared about him and relied on him and everything, and to leave the Matrix would be to abandon them? How would that have factored into his decision? Right? It's nothing that's just not explored. It's just not written in the plot, right? It's sort of easier not to deal with that in some sense. So it's interesting to think about this. Kawall's pointing out, we care about our commitments, right, to other people. The experience machine helps draw some attention to that. So of course, thinking about the films and the different sorts of situations, to what extent do those matter, right? Our relations with others, how does that factor into what we value? It's a big open question. There's a lot there, and you're free to engage with and theorize on some of these matters. I still want to see you engaging with the course material, but for instance here, this could be a kind of jumping off point. Kawall draws attention to, right, the fact that we care about our relationships with others, we care about other people and so on, but he doesn't talk about this. So what should we say? Well, there's room, right? Think, theorize, put in an argument, give reasons, right? And again, not just, here's what I think, right? Okay, right? But what are your reasons? Why should somebody else, why should some other reasonable person believe what you do or share the view that you do? Right? We're interested in exchanging our reasons, not just, oh, here's what I happen to think. Though what we happen to think itself can be an important piece of evidence, and something we're going to take a look at with the Debergard reading next. Okay, so this is really the main objection, that the experience machine doesn't just target mental state theories, but rather helps highlight different sorts of values and so on. So this is where we come around to this sort of last point. Kawall argues that the premises of the argument, or really the objection, right, what the experience machine is supposed to be showing us, don't really support the conclusion. There's a kind of gap there in the reason. So the argument as a whole isn't very good. The premises offered support the conclusion that we value more than our mental states, not the conclusion that our well-being is determined by more than our mental states. This is the tricky part. This is the part in this last section here where I think this might be the trickiest part to sort of wrap your head around and really get a good sense of. So Kawall concludes that we value more than merely our own well-being, right, or our own mental states, but argues that mental state theories or mental state theory in general is compatible with value plurality because only events that enter our mental states can affect our well-being. So what am I trying to get at here? What's Kawall trying to get at here? Okay, well, look, we care about our loved ones and their well-being, but only the elements of their well-being that enter our mental states actually affect our well-being, just like only the elements of our own situation that actually enter our mental states affect our well-being as well. So there may exist elements or factors that could affect somebody's well-being if they enter into our mental states, but they have to actually enter our mental states to affect us. Okay, let me give you an example. Say that somebody unknowingly has terminal cancer. Right? Let's just say it's me. Right? I don't know it. Right? I show no symptoms, but I've got terminal cancer. Right? It just hasn't been diagnosed yet. Now, say before I ever exhibit any signs of that cancer, I get killed in a car crash, and the disease is never detected, right? It's never picked up on autopsy or whatever. Maybe there just isn't. All right? So look, having terminal cancer can reduce somebody's well-being, right? But it has to do so via a mental state, right? Such as pain, right? Actually feeling pain from it. Knowing that one has it, right, can reduce one's well-being. Now, somebody like Bentham would argue that's because that knowing itself is a kind of pain, right, and you feel bad about knowing what's coming, and this is exactly what we can set aside. So we can have that argument, right? Is it actually a kind of pain that you have, and knowing that you've got the terminal cancer, and that's why knowing it is a bad thing because it's painful to know? Or can we say that it's not actually pain, but it's just independently bad to know about bad things or something like that, right? So this is the example, right? Something like a terminal illness is a bad thing, but the mental state theorist is going to argue it only becomes bad for your well-being when you're aware of it. That is, when it actually influences your mental state somehow, right? So look, we are in thinking that the people around us, people we care about, right? Family, friends, whoever, right? Pets. We care about them. We care about what happens to them. We care about how they feel, right? Now, thinking in terms of Bostrom simulation or inception in the dream or whatever, we can raise these questions about whether or not we can be sure that those individuals we care about themselves are real. They're actual sort of flesh and blood physical beings the way we think they are, rather than say simulations or something like that. Now, there's an interesting question. If we knew they were simulations, would we care about them just as much? Can we or should we care about simulations or beings like that the way that we care about real flesh and blood beings? Right? Do you make some kind of mistake by caring too much for a kind of interactive simulated person, right, or creature? Just imagine, right, for the sake of argument, just assume that one or more people you really care about are actually simulations. They're not real. right? Or they're robots or whatever, you know, fill in the details the way you want. So imagine they aren't the way you think they are, right? The mental state theorist, right, and this is what Kawall is saying, they can accept the fact that you value more than just your own mental states, right? But they can maintain the point that it's only by being aware of something in your mental states that that fact or whatever it is can actually influence your well-being. So just coming back, assuming that one or more of the people you deeply care about aren't real, they aren't the way you think they are, right? Can that negatively impact your well-being? The mental state theorist says only via your mental states. It's only by you becoming aware of the fact that they're not real in that sense that your well-being can somehow be impacted. You can be worse off, or somehow the value of your existence or something like that really gets impacted. So we care about more than just our own experiences, but it's only through our own experiences that something can actually affect our well-being. One last point on this. Kawall also notes that the mental state theorist is not committed to the view that we value other things, such as people or, you know, experiences of the world or whatever, only instrumentally so that they produce mental states in us. So for instance, the mental state theorist is not committed to the view that we, you know, write a book just to have the experience of writing a book, right? Rather, they're only committed to the view that it's only our experience of writing the book that actually affects our well-being, right? So, and you know, similar, when we think about people we care about and how they impact us and our well-being, the mental state theorist does not have to be committed to the view that all we really care about or value are our own mental states, and that we only interact with and to some extent care about other people for the sake of producing pleasurable experiences or something. But the mental state theorist can still maintain that the only way that our well-being is impacted, right, positively or negatively, is through our mental states. So say, right, we've got somebody you care about very, very deeply. And so let's give another version of sort of the scenario I was giving before. Apologies, is going to be, you know, kind of gruesome again. Imagine somebody you really, really deeply care about died yesterday, but you haven't found out, right? They're somewhere else, right? They're not in the kind of situation where you can easily find it. So they died. If you found out, you'd be utterly devastated. But before you find out, you yourself die, right? In either car crash or whatever. Did the death of that other person negatively impact your well-being? Mental state theorist says no, because you never found out about it. It never affected your mental states. And it's only when things affect your mental states that they can actually influence your well-being. Now, we don't just value our mental states. We don't just say, well, look, I don't care what happens to anybody or anything, so long as I don't find out about it and I have pleasurable experiences, right? This would be one reason for not plugging into the experience machine. We actually do care about other people and other things than just the pleasurable experiences we have. But the mental state theorist can still be committed to the view that our well-being is really only impacted by what enters our conscious experience via our mental states. So just coming back to this question then, what Kawall is ultimately trying to defend here is the view that, in fact, we do value more than just our mental states, but it's only through our mental states that something can impact us, right, and make us sort of better or worse off. So we value or care about more than just our mental states, but it's only our mental states that actually matter in the sense of impacting us or influencing how well we're doing, generally speaking. So maybe this is, and I'm just going to sort of hint here, so maybe this is a good reason to actually pull apart what I was saying about, you know, what's valuable is really just equivalent to what our well-being is, because precisely what Kawall is pointing out here is that we can value things, you know, other than just our own well-being or own pleasurable mental states. So we care about more than just having, you know, nice mental states, but that doesn't necessarily mean that other things will in fact impact how well we're doing or not. And so even if we care about how things really are in some sense, right, like we care about what the real world around us is like, if you're plugged into the matrix for a whole life, we're stuck in a computer simulation, never found out, that would never actually impact how we're doing. Even if we do care and would care about it, you know, if we ever found out that we were living in a simulation, right, or we were plugged into the matrix, or stuck in a dream, or whatever, maybe we really would care, right? Maybe that would impact us, right? We would be doing worse once we became aware of it. But of course, if the mental state theorists are right, it would only be once we were aware of the situation that we would be worse off. We never found out, right? We'd be no worse for wear. We'd be just as well as if we had never been in the simulation or stuck in the dream or whatever in the first place. Right? So what really matters is more the creeping doubts, the uncertainty, right? That kind of experience, or finding out that in fact things aren't the way you thought they were, if you care whether or not they are that way. So in fact, if the mental state theorists are right, this might give us some kind of reason to, if we can, try to not care about whether or not we're stuck in a dream or a simulation or the matrix or whatever, precisely because by caring about it, and if we can't be certain, or at least if we can't have really good reason to feel pretty secure one way or the other about knowing we are or not stuck in a dream, or right, if reality is or isn't the way it appears to us, if we're stuck in that kind of uncertainty and we really care about the certainty, that itself might produce, right, negative mental states, a kind of painful doubt of existence. And here, just as I say it, I think about Mal and the sort of big exchange with Cobb down in Limbo near the end of Inception, right? Don't you have any creeping doubts, right? Are you certain? Are you sure that reality is the way it seems to you? Are you positive you're not stuck in a dream, right? You've got at least some decent reason to think you might be. Right? No. Right? Maybe that's the right response, even if he is stuck in a dream. Maybe, I don't know, but I'll leave that for you to think about and engage with. All right, I've got a few other things I could say, but I think I'll wrap it up to leave you some intellectual breathing room so you can look at the piece, think about it, think about what's going on here. If you've got any questions about it, feel free to contact me. That last point is the sort of most difficult one in it, but I hope the examples helped and just the way I tried to phrase the point did as well. So that's it for today. Tomorrow, we are going to be taking a look at the date regard piece and introducing some actual psychological data on what people think. So we are going to be looking a little bit at sort of just people's mere opinions, you know, how they answer some questions in a kind of psychological survey related to this issue. And that'll give us a little bit more information, a little bit more to think about, but of course, doesn't just solve our problems and end the discussion. So that's it for now. I hope you're doing well. You'll see me again tomorrow when I talk about the date regard piece. Until then, take care.